It's JD at Fiesta Church. Welcome to the second week of our study through Genesis. It's not what you think. We called it that because this is not a study of creation versus evolution. This is going to be looking at the character of God, who we are, and what our relationship is supposed to be with Him. And we're doing that through two lenses. The first is looking at who the author is. This book was written by Moses. Moses was a Near Eastern shepherd who lived 3,000 to 3,500 years ago. And he was writing to a very specific people group, and that's the second thing. We're looking at the culture he was writing to, what their understanding of God is, because that reveals to us something about our religion and other religions, because all religions are not the same. And so as we begin to look, we're going to look at the character of God. And I want to start off by saying, when we think of the character of God, most of us in our culture think of one of two things. Either we think of the justice of God, and we picture God as some cosmic scorekeeper who's just upstairs keeping track of our rights and wrongs, waiting to zap us if we mess up, and He's going to get us in the end, or maybe just barely pass us. Or the second thing is we think of God's love, and we just picture that He's just all love, so we can do whatever we want because God just loves us. And God does have love and justice both in His character, but His character is infinitely more complex than that. As a matter of fact, when we begin to look what the Bible tells us about God, the first thing that gets written down about Him is this. It says, in the beginning, God created. And we stop right there because the first thing the Bible tells us about God is creative. And we know this, of course He is. Look at everything around us. He created all of this. That's what the Bible tells us. And yet, do we understand that creativeness, or do we take it for granted? I mean, it's kind of like describing Michelangelo and just saying he was a scholar and not mentioning that he was a painter and a sculptor and an inventor and all of those things. God is creative. And think of the level of creation. And it's not just that this planet and creation goes out beyond our solar system into the galaxy and even into the universe. It's how finely detailed the creation is. A couple of years ago, my wife Linda had an issue with her eyes, and so we went to an optometrist, and the optometrist had her look into a machine, and the machine blew the picture of her eye up, the image of her eye up, beyond anything that I ever thought was even possible. And as I began to look at the picture, I began to see a beauty I never thought was there. Because we picture this part of our eye that gives us color as just kind of this blur of color, and yet when you look at it, it's actually comprised of very fine lines and threads of color woven together into one beautiful, brilliant picture. And I saw a level of beauty I never even knew existed. And then I realized that for most of human history, up until at best the last couple hundred years, no one could ever even see that. And yet God, the Creator, chose to design and to create with that level of detail. That's who God is. God is a creator. And here's the thing that's amazing. This universe is His creation. This planet is His creation. But listen, you and I are part of His creation. He created you and me specifically and with a purpose. And the first thing of His character we need to look at is God is creative. But then the second thing that we need to see, the second thing is a touch point for Moses. He's going to start to reconnect with his audience. See, they had no picture of creation out of nothing. But then and so he describes that God created from nothing, but then he comes to a level of detail that they would understand. Because it writes that the earth was formless and void. There was darkness over the deep, and the Spirit of God moved over the face of the waters. And what that's telling us is that creation was just kind of this chaotic mess. It was just kind of jumbled together. And that's a view of the beginning that these people would have understand. But here's what it differentiates. See, they had a picture that their gods then fought and had conflict and had chaos, and kind of what resulted was just sort of an afterthought. It just sort of poured out of the conflict. And yet the view of God is very, very structured. God begins in day one. He separates light from darkness. Day two, He separates the earth and the sky. Day three, He separates the land and the water. He's creating the very basic building blocks that were necessary for life to even happen. It's very, very structured. See, if all those other religions are teaching order or teaching creation out of chaos, they're kind of like punk rock. And the God we find in the Bible is orchestrating a symphony. He's a conductor. As a matter of fact, Andy Stanley once said that whatever God originates, He orchestrates. And God is beginning to orchestrate His creation, and He's separating everything out so things are possible. Day 4, He begins to create things that have meaning. And so He creates the sun and the moon and the stars, and He tells them they're to govern the day and the night. They have meaning, they have purpose. Then He creates all the birds of the air and the creatures in the sea. And day 5, they have purpose. And then last, it's the animals on the land and you and me. And what's the first thing we're told to do? Our purpose It's not just to walk around the garden. It is to care for the garden and care for the animals. Listen, this is really important because we live in a culture where, for whatever reason, politically, some people think that Christians and the church and organized religion are an enemy of the environmental movement. Listen, this is what the Bible tells us, that this is God's creation and our job is to care for it. No one should be against clean air and clean water. In fact, our job is to care for creation. And the first thing that we find satisfaction in is creating. Which of us hasn't taken the time to create something or care for something and found satisfaction? You know, that's an echo of God. See, there's a pattern that's repeated. God creates, then he looks back and he says it is good. Each day he creates, he works, then he sits back and he says it is good. My wife and I like to do home improvement projects, and sometimes she'll push me to do something I don't think I can do. But at the end of the day, one of the most satisfying things is when the project is done, to sit back and say it's good. Now, it's not always perfect, but it's good. And that's what God does. God is sitting back and he's looking and he's saying, you know what? That's good. That's good each day. And so when we feel that satisfaction in our work, that's an echo of God. That's us living the purpose of the one who created us. And then the final thing that we see, and we miss this in our culture. The last thing God does in this creation account, seventh day, he rested. Everybody knows this, but connect it to what Moses is teaching them, right? He's saying that our God created from nothing. He's saying that our God created with order. And then the final thing, whereas their gods were all limited, they would create a temple and the gods could reign and rest in their temple. God rests in all of creation. See, God doesn't need to rest because he's tired. He's God. He doesn't get tired. He says, I'm going to rest as an example to us. But then he says, I'm going to rest to demonstrate something else. I can rest wherever I want because I created it all and I rule and reign in all of it. That means everything, not just in this earth, but everything specifically in your life, God can reign in. So what about you as we come to the end of this study? Does order and structure sound like your life, or are you caught up in the chaos of this world and the conflict of this world? Well, there's no place that you can go. There's nothing going on in your life that God can't bring order to. God wants to help you have structure, have purpose, have meaning, have all of those things. And the God who reigns in all of the earth reigns in whatever's going on with you. And if you would like to know more information about him, we'd like to talk with you about him. Wherever you're at, you're never too far from where God can help you. If he could order the entire universe, what can he do for you? So if you're interested in knowing more about him, or if you'd like to partner with us, contact us here at Fiesta Church. Thank you and God bless.